Okay, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar today. My name is Emma Wall and I'm the event coordinator at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. For those of you who don't know, we're a not-for-profit organisation whose aim is to strengthen the not-for-profit community sector in Australia and New Zealand by providing a variety of information, products, resources and programs, especially in the field of technology, social media, marketing and communications. Our webinar today will be presented by Stephanie from Info Exchange, who will provide an introduction to SharePoint. We have over 140 people from across Australia and New Zealand participating today. We will take questions halfway through and at the end. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible, but please know, just due to the volume of people, we may not be able to get to everyone. If you have a question, please type it in the question box on your webinar panel and we'll go through them one by one. I would now like to hand the webinar over to Stephanie.
Thank you, Emma. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for making the time to do this webinar today. It's hopefully going to be really interesting for you, and hopefully it won't be too much PowerPoint and a little bit more. We've got some screenshots, and just depending on the technology, I might be able to show you some examples if we can. And it's really meant to be an introduction to the platform of SharePoint. My name's Stephanie Kachias. I work for a company called Info Exchange, which, much like Connecting Up, is a non-for-profit IT company that works to empower the non-for-profit sector and also the disadvantaged within Australia and New Zealand. So I'm part of the consulting team, and I work with organisations across Australia and also in New Zealand a couple of times now, in working on mainly their intranet projects and getting their SharePoint sites up and running, but also complementary projects to that, things like getting their internal communications and communications policies within a business, and also document management. I do a lot of work in that space as well. So I've got about 5 years of experience working with SharePoint as a technology. Before this, I worked at a big consulting firm running their intranet there. So there was different kinds of challenges, but also some classic things that you learn along the way that hopefully I can pass on some of my learnings to you today about that. So today, what we'll be doing is basically going over what is SharePoint and what is it at a really basic level. I know a lot of clients that I've worked with have sort of heard of it, and it's a word that gets thrown around, but what does it actually do and where does it fit in, especially in the new Office 365 suite? Some of the driving factors as to why people choose to use SharePoint in their organisation as a solution, and that's when I'll go through some examples of what exactly it can do and some of the benefits of the system itself. We've also got a section about a couple of alternative or complementary systems to SharePoint and how you work with other systems in the Microsoft suite with SharePoint, particularly Yammer and also OneDrive for Business, because there are differences and there are times when you would use one and the other. And then the last bit is really just, I've got 4 big points that I want to get across that are sort of non-technical points. They're governance and strategy ideas that I think it's really important for any organisation thinking about going into using SharePoint should think about before they start an implementation or start thinking about what it's for. So today's session really is a deep dive into SharePoint, which is one of the bigger and more complex business features of the Office 365 offering to non-for-profits. So we've got another webinar on the 4th of March with my colleague Matt, who will be going over broader Office 365 features and just in general, like implementing and thinking about implementing Office 365 in general. So this webinar is to complement that in a way. SharePoint's a big chunk of 365 and kind of needs its own space to be talked about. But this webinar won't be covering some of the broader things that Office 365 Suite offers, so like email and Link and other sorts of products that come as part of that suite. Another caveat I'll say is that SharePoint is an incredibly comprehensive and complex system, and it's got a lot of potential to be a very big, complex part of your infrastructure. This webinar is really not going to go into where SharePoint can go to the limits. There are a lot of companies that push it and develop it to do very complex things for them, and that's fantastic, and it can do all of those things. And we can touch on them if you like, if you've got specific questions about potential development opportunities. But this webinar really is focused on getting the basics right, and is aimed at smaller or non-for-profit organisations who potentially want to just learn the basics about this platform. I also really think this presentation for me is about things that I think all organisations should think about before they start implementing SharePoint. I've worked now with a few who've dived headfirst, and you might have heard some, I won't say horror stories, but examples of SharePoint implementations that have gone wrong. And it does happen, and I think most of the time that happens because strategically organisations haven't asked themselves the right sort of questions before they jump in, and they go to implement a system to solve a problem, and maybe that was never the right tactic to take in the first place. So hopefully this presentation gets you thinking about some of those bigger picture, which I think are actually sort of more interesting than the actual technology, but that's maybe because I'm a business analyst at heart. So first of all, let's jump into it. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what I think SharePoint is, and try to give you an understanding of it in a nutshell, which is hard because it's big. So SharePoint is a system that organisations use to build secure internal websites, aka an intranet. Intranets are a website that are secure to people within an organisation. So they're generally not accessible to the general public. You need to have a login or to have some sort of authentication on your machine to get into this website and to see the content in this website. But it is a website that's on the net. It's just on a sort of private area of the net. SharePoint has been used for years. The first version came out in 2001, and it was originally a server product in that you had to purchase a SharePoint server and a SQL server and run the application on premises. And it was a pretty big, expensive beast, and it was therefore pretty much confined to the big end of town and organisations that really did need a portal to share things across many offices and many, many staff. So, you know, big consulting firms, banks, I'm pretty sure some of the big mining firms have them now, and telcos as well have them. So, you know, the big end of town would invest in these big systems, and it tended to not be worth it for smaller organisations in terms of just the cost benefit. A content management system is a software package that provides tools and an organising structure on which to build websites and also host various types of content. And by content I mean web pages, but can also mean documents, videos, images, and maybe some other interactive applications. So typically a content management system is used to manage public websites, and you might have heard of something like WordPress. And I think there's another Connecting Up webinar coming up on WordPress as well, and WordPress is a very typical website content management system for the public websites, but SharePoint is pretty much confined to intranets, although you can build websites on SharePoint, but you know, not on the free Office 365 version. You need a server. So yeah, even though it once was a server product, it's now available online as the product is SharePoint Online as part of the Office 365 suite. And therefore, if you're a non-for-profit in Australia and New Zealand, you can access that service with free licenses. It's accessed via a web browser such as Internet Explorer, Chrome or Firefox, and it's secure. So only people with a login can get into it and use it. So in a diagram form, you know, what once was at least a couple of servers on the premises that you had to run SharePoint, along with all of your other, you know, IT infrastructure that you might run on-premise servers. The Office 365 suite which is in Microsoft's cloud, provides a range of different products that are all basically just hosted for you in the cloud, and all you need is your subscription. You know, every user gets their login and they go into the browser and they've got a bunch of different, and they've got to log into different applications, and it's all covered. So you've got things like, obviously, Outlook in the cloud. You've got Office web apps, so you can open up Word, PowerPoint documents in the browser. You've got Link, which is Microsoft's instant messaging platform. And you've got SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business, and obviously that's what we're focusing on today. And I'll go into the difference between OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online later. But essentially, what used to be a server product is now completely available to you free in the cloud, and you get essentially you can get an intranet out of SharePoint, you can get a document management solution out of SharePoint, you can get a team site collaboration portal out of SharePoint. So there's a lot of benefits now with the Office 365 suite. So, okay, that's kind of it, but it's still a very kind of, I guess, nebulous concept of what SharePoint is. So what can it do specifically, and why do organisations think, yeah, this product sounds great for me and it sounds like the sort of thing we want? So yeah, as I said, it does a lot, but I'd say it does primarily three things very well and are its big selling points. One, it's an intranet. An intranet typically and traditionally is like a platform for the organisation's information. It's your internal homepage. You know, most of the time, if you have an intranet in an organisation, you set it up so that when your staff come into work, they open up their browser, and the intranet homepage is the first thing they see at work. And that's got things like news feeds from the executive, potentially news feeds from across the business, if that's the way you want to work, where everyone can post updates. It's got useful document storage hubs for policies and you know, policies, guidelines, forms, things like that your staff want to access quickly and have available to them really easily. And in general is sort of like, should be, in a perfect world, should be this sort of source of truth for the organisation that everything is stored in and just easy to find things, instead of it being locked away in some shared drive somewhere that's difficult to find. So it can serve that purpose, and we'll go into that in a minute. It can also be a really powerful document management tool, and I'll go into some of the features as to why it's good at that too. But essentially, it's really, it's like a shared drive, but it's in the cloud, and it comes with features that a shared drive, like, and when I say shared drive, it's when, you know, you've got a local storage solution where you all, you know, say it's called the S drive or the Y drive or the J drive or whatever it is you call it, and that's where all the folders for your organisations are, and that's where you put work to share across organisations if you have one, as opposed to, say, storing it on your local machine. But what it does, it lets you do a lot more with those documents. It lets you organise those documents in a much more sophisticated way than just folders. Lastly, it has the ability to support teams who work on projects together by grouping a bunch of information, documents, task lists, calendars, other linked lists, and just general useful tools that are productivity tools for teams, and that's kind of part of the SharePoint offering, is that you get a little site with a bunch of little features in it that hopefully everyone can find useful. But you don't have to. You can take some of those away if they're not useful to you. And yeah, some teams find that a really useful way of working. So why would you want to get an intranet? Things like reducing email. If you've got an organisation that sends all staff emails around for every little update across the business, it can get quite inefficient and annoying for people. Streamlining and standardising internal communications, and finding information quickly, so things like staff lists and policies and that stuff that can be managed centrally. Document management is great for better version controlling, not having to save over copies, not having to send email attachments and then figuring out what was the latest version of that document, being able to be in a document at the same time as someone else and edit it, being able to track the versions back, and are all of the sorts of things that come out of the box with SharePoint. A team site is great if you want all of your content to be together and you want to have your team sites available to pretty much the whole business, and you want to promote better collaboration between teams. You can have a list of different team sites and you can have them all open, and if I go to that team I can see what they're doing, and and they can come into my site and see what I'm doing, and it promotes sharing and open culture, although it doesn't have to. If you want to lock things down, you can. Okay, so this screenshot is a very vanilla, non-branded sort of thing you would get out of the box from SharePoint very quickly. So, and you could get this set up, within hours really, once you go into Office 365 and set up a SharePoint site. And what you see there is very typical sorts of content you'd see on a SharePoint site. So, a news feed from the business, some links, some quick links along the right there to other applications that are useful to your staff, so a CRM or finance system or a HR system. Along the right down the bottom, you'll see there's a list with people's names and phone numbers, and an events calendar underneath as well that's got upcoming training or social events or whatever it is that you want to promote and remind people are coming. Along the left, you've got a classic sort of quick links to your team, your internal policies documents and your training and handbook documents that are just one click away from anyone looking for it. And then along the top, in this part here, you can see here, there's the home menu, which has got links to all of your sub-sites and the sites that sit within this home site. So a finance site, a HR site, a marketing team site. So what you see here too is that this is part of the 365 portal, because up here we can see, and if you don't have Office 365, this won't be familiar to you, but if you do, you'll notice that this is up here, the Office 365 admin menu at the very top. So you're always logged in as part of that. You can get to your email portal quickly. You could get to your OneDrive portal quickly. You can get across all of the different 365 applications from that top level menu. So it's all a part of that wider offering. You can take it to the next level and start to change things around. You can start to put little icons in for social media. You can put your own logo here. This is still an out-of-the-box, non-branded view, but we've changed the colour and we've changed the logo, and we've put in some pictures, and you can start to do things out of the box without needing to go into the code or re-skinning the actual site to get it to look a little bit more like your organisation. And you can have whatever you like there. You see here I've got a CEO update. I quite like that. Having like a sort of all staff announcements in the middle, and then a blog from the CEO or a leadership portal messages along the right. That's sort of a classic thing to do. So you can do it that way. And again, along here, you've got policies and templates, staff directory, and again up here you've got links to other useful portals that have specific information about the HR team, for example. You can then, if you want to, find a design partner to help you reskin the SharePoint site altogether. So this is an example of just like a really generic, again, you can take SharePoint to the extreme and you can completely reskin it and have like rotating banners and I'll show you that the Info Exchange intranet in a moment, which has an image widget on the front. So you can do that sort of thing. This is a sort of mid-level skinning where they've put custom colours in, they've put a custom menu in, and they've done the web parts, which is web parts with these little boxes like widgets of content that they're exposing from different parts of the site. And they've skinned them so that they have the nice blue, their branded blue. So you can do this sort of thing. You can get it to look and feel a lot more branded to you, but that normally takes a SharePoint consultant who's a designer. It would depend on how complex you wanted to go, how much time and effort that would take a designer. If it was fairly simple and just changing colours and fonts, it's probably a couple of days of their work testing it for you. If it's got more intense and more customised features like big mega menus that you see these days, and big images and custom headers and things like that, that might take a little bit more of their development time to get right for you. But you can make it look pretty. I mean, I don't mind personally the out of the box branding. I don't think it's that bad, but some people do find it quite it's quite plain. So some people want to make it their own. One thing that SharePoint can do, and I wanted to just show you that something that it can do really well with a little bit of work, but and again, it'll just depend on how far you wanted to take it, would be forms and lists that turn into forms. So you can have some of your simpler processes at work that are currently paper-based, and you can convert them into a SharePoint list that has a form on top of that list that users can go in and submit. So at Info Exchange, we use it for new starter administration. This form has been done in an application called InfoPath, which is Microsoft's form program, and you can customize forms that way and get it looking and feeling how you like it to look. That then goes and talks to a SharePoint list, which is a SharePoint list is basically like a fancy Excel spreadsheet that sits in the browser and holds data and holds items of data. So you submit a form and you're submitting an item of data. So in this case, you'd be submitting a new starter and you're ticking off all of the things that they need. The HR would fill out this form and someone starts and says, yep, they need this computer, they need this they need a security key from facilities, and they need this kind of computer because we work in IT, so different people have different computer needs. But your business would have obviously its own different processes. But I just wanted to show an example of some of the things that this could do, and then you could just have you go into the HR portal in SharePoint, and there'd be a button that says new starter form, click here, and this is what you get that would pop up, and you just fill it in, and the team in HR would get an email or something, and they'd come in and then do it. But that would be how you do it, instead of printing out a form, filling out the form, scanning it and sending it back, and then handing it into HR. You could automate that a little bit better, and that wouldn't take. This form in itself isn't a particularly complex form. You can get them very complex, and you can get them with very complex workflows that sit in the back. Sometimes if you want to go more complex, you might want to look at a third-party add-on tool to really. There are some really great third-party tools on the market that you pay for and you install onto SharePoint, and they run your forms and your workflows. It would depend on how complex you wanted it to go before you'd have to look at that. SharePoint will do some of it out of the box, but it is limited, and then depending on how far you want to take it, you might need to look at another solution. But it is possible, and when done well and when planned well, and the process is planned out properly with a good business analyst thinking behind it, the technology follows pretty quickly. So I just wanted to show that as an example of some of the bit more advanced things you can do in an intranet. So I talked about document management, which is another big thing that SharePoint does. So along with lists in SharePoint, which are those data sets, SharePoint hosts document libraries, and document libraries come out of the box with a bunch of features that are really, really cool. So once you've uploaded, and you can literally click and drag documents into a library, you can then manage those documents in the browser with some cool features. You can edit them. You can go open, edit, and if you see there, hopefully you can see when you click on this sort of the document menu, you've got here an edit, share, file, and you can see a preview of the document and see who it's shared with. And then you can click edit and of course open it and save changes and just save back to it. You can edit it in the browser because you'll have Office Web Apps as part of 365, but you can also set it and you can also tell it to open up in your local Word application. And Word and PowerPoint locally as an application do have, they're a little bit more sophisticated than the web browser version. Although the web browser version is fantastic if you're on the move and you're logging in from a computer you're not normally logging in from, and you just want to quickly check something or make a quick edit. It's really good and simple. But if you want to do like sort of more, I guess, complex things in the document, you probably want to open it in the application. So apart from doing those normal things, you've also got, when you click on like the extended menu, a lot of other really cool things, including compliance details, checking any workflows, downloading a copy, viewing the properties of the document. But for me, the really cool thing, and I think the one that most clients respond to, is the version control. So when you edit a document in SharePoint, it will automatically log it as a new version for you. You can set it to be major versions or minor versions, and you can set it to, you can tell it exactly how you want it to behave, but essentially you can set it up so that it automatically tells you when something is when something is the newest version, and will keep old versions. So if you're working on a document with a team member and you've done one version and you want someone else to look at it and make some edits, you would send them the link to the document. You wouldn't send an attachment, because an attachment is essentially making a copy of a document when you attach it to an email. Instead, you would click the little send button that was in the menu, or you would just right-click and get the link and paste the link into an email to them. And provided that they could log in and have the right rights, they would just go in, they could edit it, save it, and then later on you could go in, and in this version here I've got my name twice because I've edited it twice. But that would have, say it was my colleague Matt, it would have his name, and if he wanted to, when he checked it back, when he saved it, he could have added comments and said something like, yep, checked, and added a few bits and pieces for your review before sending to client, or whatever. And then I go in, make another few, clean it up again, save it as version 3, and then put in the comments, yep, version 3 is the version we sent to the client, for example. So it's a really cool, efficient way of working with that completely eradicates this whole save as, rename the document, version 2, what was the last version, can you make sure you saved it into the right folder so I can see it, oh, I've got to download it from the email. All of that goes because it's all in the one system, and it does all of that for you. And it also allows you to be a lot more succinct and meaningful with your document name. So you can just say something like, this project, final report, and that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to have the date on it. It doesn't need to have the version number, because the date and the person who edited it and the version is all tracked for you. So it's one of the best features. One of the other great features that SharePoint does when you're working with documents is it allows co-authoring. And what co-authoring is two people being in a document and editing it at the same time. So it's a common thing when you're working on shared drives. You want to open a document and look at it and edit it, and it's being locked for editing by someone else, and you can only read only. For teams who work on things like tenders, for teams who work on reports that need a deadline, it's quite time-consuming. And there's often, I used to work at a consulting firm, and I remember it was a huge hassle. The project manager or whoever was in charge of the document had, not only did they have to half write it, but they became this conduit person for all of the versions and for everyone. Okay, I'm going to send you this, and you work on this section, and then you send it back to me, and I'll copy it into the master version, and all of that stuff. So what this does is completely, again, eradicate that. So what you do is just open the document and start working. And what it does, if you can see there, if you go in and someone else comes into it, it'll tell you someone else is now editing this document, and it would also lock down. And as you can sort of see where there's that little this thing here, what it's telling you is that your colleague is working on that document right now, and that part of the document right now, and therefore you can't edit it. So it's really cool. It won't let you type it, and then what happens is you both press save and refresh, which is that little insert there. It's got the little green refresh button over the save, and when you both press that, it'll push your changes through, and then you'll be able to see their changes, they'll see your changes, and you can continue working. And it's really fantastic. If you're both in the browser version, it actually will change in real time. You can see them typing. That's in the browser if you're both working on the Office Web Apps version. But if you're in the application version like this is, you have to continually press save. But it's still, again, so much more convenient than the previous way of working for so many organisations. Finally, document management with SharePoint means that you can use the OneDrive local application, which is a sync application on your phone that comes with the 365 suite. Now, don't get confused because it is confusing. The OneDrive application on your machine, what I'm talking about right now, is different to the OneDrive for Business Drive that I'll talk to you about in a moment, and they have the same name, and that's why it's confusing. So what I'm talking about now is there's a little application on your machine that is a sync tool, and when you sync a SharePoint library, that tool is activated, and it will do a thing where if any of you have used a Dropbox or Google Drive or perhaps even the OneDrive consumer product, because just to make it even more confusing, there's a third product that Microsoft offers that is a consumer product that is meant to compete with Google Drive and Dropbox. But anyway, they all do a similar thing where they will make a copy down to your local machine, and you can then work on that copy, and it will automatically sync back up changes that you've made to those documents to the SharePoint library. So you don't have to go through the browser to get your documents. Although I do recommend that when you're doing training, if you are looking at doing this, you do train your staff to understand that there's the browser there. I've seen some organisations try to do it where they just they sync everything and they map everything to their local so that it looks and feels like this, which is what people are used to, which is absolutely fine. And I mean, I work that way. When I've synced my libraries, I definitely go in that way. But it's important that people understand that there is the quote-unquote server version sitting here in the library that they can access from any browser. If for some reason the sync breaks or their machine, their machine dies and they don't have access to their local, to their local copies, they can always go back in through any machine, through any browser, and find these documents sitting on the quote-unquote server, which isn't really a server, in the cloud. So, but if you notice there, I've synced that library, so you can see all of those. You can see all of those folders are reflected here in my local version, in my desktop. And so if I wanted to go and find a document in one of those libraries or in one of those folders, I could just go directly here, and I won't have to go into the browser. The last thing I'll quickly touch on that it does is this idea of team collaboration. So you can set up a team site in SharePoint, and that team site can host a bunch of useful tools. So, for example, in this one, you've got a document. This is an example of a site that we set up with a client to collaborate on a project we were doing with them, and we had a little news feed here. We had all the documents related to that project, and we've also got a little project summary web part that is really just a view of a task list, which is sort of similar to this, where you've got literally a list that you can tick off items to do on a list of data, and you can sync that to Outlook, and it becomes like a task list for you if you work that way with tasks. And some project managers like it, some project managers don't, but I guess the point is it's there for you if you wanted to use it. So you and the team have one place where you go, and you've got a bunch of libraries and different lists that we were testing out different things, so we had them all there to test. And all of our documents were there together, and we could just sync that library all together. I think at this point, Emma, it's probably half time, so we should take a quick break for questions?
Yeah, sure. We've just got a couple here. So how do you comment on a version of the document using SharePoint?
Yep. I'll see if I can demonstrate it. Hopefully I can. What I'll do is get a... so what I'm showing you up here, and this is an example of the what I said before of our SharePoint, the Info Exchange intranet. As you can see, we've got this sort of web part here that shows pictures, so you can do a few more bits and pieces with things. If I go to one of my libraries, I can show you how to do that. So there's actually two ways you can do it. You could do it through through the actual, when you're in the document itself, or no, I'll go to Kids Undercover because I've already showed you that. You can see what I'm doing, right? Okay, so
Yes, we can.
yeah. So if I see where I've gone into the version, I've gone into the menu of the document, and I can check out the version history of this document. Right, so because we've got minor versioning turned on this library, that's why it's got 0.1, 0.2. I haven't published actually a major version yet because that's not, I haven't needed to for this document, so I'll do it right now. It's that simple, where I can then go so now, when I go to version history, it's gone. If I published that latest version, I upgraded it to a major version, and there are my comments published for demonstration. And you can see the date that I did that. And the other cool thing you can do here, where you'll see when I hover over an old version, I can view the old version, I can restore the old version if I want. I can say, no, actually, you know, such and such went in and made changes and published it. Well, I disagree, I'm going to restore, or no, actually, I've changed my mind. And you can delete the old version as well if when you no longer need them, and just keep the major ones. So that's it, really.
Thanks, Steph. Just got a couple more. Can you please explain the search function in document management?
Sure. Out of the box, SharePoint will have a search function built into all document libraries and indeed across all of the sites. So in SharePoint, in general, you'll always have this top-level site search, and it'll search the sub-site that you're in, but there will always be this drop-down where you can search across all sites, you can search people, conversations. So that'll search all site content. When you're in a document library, though, you'll also see, and if we go into, particularly into, actually, there's also a file search right here, in which case you could write and the other thing you see here is that I've searched for requirements, which is probably a fairly common word used in an IT a library. That searched the entire document. So that'll find any mention of the word requirements in the entire document, not just in the name. You can also, yeah, I mean that's how it is by default. And then you can also search within a folder. So if you go into this folder, I'm pretty sure it's just brought back content from within that folder. So wherever you're in currently, it'll search that view. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Just another one. What is the best desktop tool for Macs?
Best desktop, as in for working with SharePoint. So Mac has literally just released OneDrive for Business Sync tool. It's in beta for Macs. So it's something that they haven't been doing at a sort of, I guess they haven't prioritised it as part of their offering. They have now a tool, a client, like I said, that little client that syncs. You can now get a Mac version of that client that will let you download and sync OneDrive for Business documents, and I think hopefully eventually SharePoint libraries to a Mac desktop. But essentially, Macs and SharePoint, I mean, it's Apple versus Microsoft. You're going to get compatibility issues a little bit unless you properly manage it. So I would say if you're at a Mac house and you're thinking about Office 365 and SharePoint, you just do your due diligence and testing to make sure that whatever apps you do use. So there is the, I think it's Office 2011 is the last version that they released for Macs. I believe that they have a 2015 coming out. They've said it sort of unofficially. It's got to come out soon. It's been enough time. I would expect it in the next year, where their local machines, their local desktop applications are upgraded to again probably work with Sync. That said, I have opened up SharePoint documents from my home Mac. I use a Mac at home, and I have edited it with my Office 2011 version of Mac, and I have saved it back and it worked. So as long as the desktop version logs you in as you, which it should prompt you when you've opened the document, you should have that's my, on paper it works, but Mac environments in businesses are tricky beasts, and well, just like Windows, and so if you do work that way and you're thinking about Office 365, I would just make sure you just do a lot of research before you go down that path.
Okay, thanks Stephanie. I think we'll continue on and we'll ask the rest of the questions towards the end.
Yeah, well, we've got only a few more slides to go. I wanted to quickly go over a couple of other tools. Microsoft can work in tandem, SharePoint can work in tandem with a couple of other Microsoft products pretty seamlessly. The first one is the OneDrive for Business. So you'll recall from this slide that there was a range of products offered to users when they get 365, including OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online. And when we go, this view kind of explains that even better. When you go into any site in Office 365 and you click on your little menu up in the top left, it'll open up your Office 365 applications, and as you can see there's a whole range of them. You've got your SharePoint site, if you've got CRM, not all organisations have CRM, but we do, so we've got that there. I've got Yammer, I've got all my Windows apps and Outlook, my calendar and all that sort of stuff. So OneDrive sits right next to SharePoint because they're kind of similar. So the difference between OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online is that OneDrive for Business is every user's personal storage space for the business. But when I say personal, I mean business personal. I don't mean it's not a separate account that they've set up themselves. It comes as part of the 365 suite, and you only have one if if your organisation has set up Office 365 for you. When you go from an organisation, you don't take your OneDrive for Business stuff with you. It's not your personal area. However, in the context of the business, it is personal to you. You've got your own area. You have 1 terabyte worth of storage. It's not expandable. That's what you get. And by default, every document put in your OneDrive for Business library is default private to you, and you can open it up you can open certain documents or folders up to share with your colleagues, but it's your area. Think of it like your new, a lot of businesses have their own local C drives or their own local drives for everyone's personal use, and that's often where a lot of people do the majority of their work. This is that. SharePoint Online is, a centrally managed collection of libraries and sites that would be set up consciously by a business if they were going to go down the SharePoint path. You get 10 gig plus 0.5 gigabyte per license free. What does that mean? Basically, you get 10 gig per person. So it depends on how big your organisation is. But you can also expand that. You can pay for more storage through your portal if you want. And then the data for that is centrally managed, and by default, those libraries are set up to be shared and generally accessible across everyone. You can lock down SharePoint libraries so that only certain people can get into certain things, but by definition, it's not like a personal library, it's an organizational library. Both can be synced down to your laptop or your computer, as I displayed before, through that OneDrive sync tool. But they are essentially two different services. So as an information manager, my big, what I like to tell my clients is that they really do need to think long and hard about what they want and expect their staff to do, and how they expect them to work, whether or not they want them to work on OneDrive for Business or on SharePoint Online for their work. And I need to keep going because I don't want to run out of time. So Yammer is the other tool I wanted to quickly talk about. Yammer is an enterprise social network tool, and it's much like Facebook. I think it's very, very much like Facebook. And it was built in 2008. It was founded, and Microsoft acquired the Yammer company in 2012. So now Yammer is sort of, you can get Yammer for free, the Yammer standard. The standard Yammer subscription just through the internet. You can go and set that up today even if you didn't have 365. With Office 365 you get premium business Yammer, which gives you a lot more features. So that comes as part of the suite now. So some organisations find that Yammer is better for them for their internal tools. So Yammer is a fantastic communications and social platform. It's really, as you can see there, like it's very Facebooky. You can put up posts, and people can comment and like and click up links, and it's very social media-like. So some businesses find, and it's got an app that's really easy to use, and you can log into your app and do things from the phone and things like that. So some businesses find that they much prefer Yammer as a communications and connectivity tool for teams, and you can create groups in Yammer, and different teams can work together and post things to each other, as opposed to a more traditional intranet where you've got your announcement feed essentially. And so in fact at Info Exchange that's what we do. You'll recall, and if I go back here, we have our Yammer feed embedded into the front page of our intranet. We actually don't use the intranet as our communications platform. We use Yammer as our communications platform, and we just embed it into the intranet. So again, down here you'll see the Yammer app open. The little So on the front page of our intranet is a Yammer feed that we all post on, as you can see. So the two can work really quite nicely together. I guess I just wanted to say, so again, as an information manager, it's just about deciding what tools you want to use. Some businesses don't use Yammer at all; they don't want it. So it really becomes more about how you and your culture at your work is, and what you want to promote, and how you want to promote communications within your business. So I guess I just wanted to quickly show that, because they both OneDrive and Yammer do similar things to what SharePoint does, but there are some important differences that it's important that you understand. Finally, I just wanted to cover, and I'll stream through this because this is sort of not as juicy, but I think still really important. just some of the things that I think businesses should think about before they get into SharePoint. First of all, what's your strategy? Why do you want and need SharePoint? Is it a problem? So is an intranet or is SharePoint the best tool to solve whatever problem you have? So a lot of businesses do, they come into it, they decide we've got terrible document management, or we send too many emails. Let's get SharePoint. That's fine, and that could work really well. I guess it's just about really interrogating those reasons and making sure you're clear that it's maybe not some other problem that's causing you strife, and maybe it's not a technology problem, because you can implement a new technology and you'll still have that problem. There are some real differences in the way people work, especially with documents with SharePoint. So it's just about, is your business, is your staff and your culture ready for change, and do you think people will embrace it, or do you think there'll be a lot of resistance, and how much change management do you not want to do? And just what is the purpose that you're trying to achieve? So if you go into any project with a good strategy for that, it just puts you in so much better stead for implementation. Implementation, how are you actually going to do it? Do you have the capability and capacity internally to implement it? If not, do you need an external partner, or do you need to get that capability in? Going forward, who will be in charge of this intranet, and who will manage it? This slide looks busy, and I don't need you to read every line, but I guess what will it look like? What's your information architecture? SharePoint's hierarchical, so it likes to have different areas that are for particular teams. So how do you want to set that up? Do you want it to be department-based? Do you want it to be team? Do you want it to be more about cross-department team, and therefore do you want to set up your site a little bit differently? Think about the design of it, the information architecture design of it. And finally, what's the governance? Who is in charge of what, and what kind of permission sets do you want to have across the site? Think about the practicalities and administrative overhead of maintaining really strict policies. SharePoint, and then in general, this whole way of working can be quite radical, in a radical shift for the way organisations work. A lot of organisations can be quite siloed and be very stuck in old ways of working on, this is my document and I'll send it when I'm ready to send it, and I don't want anyone seeing it until I'm done with it. That's so much harder to administer that kind of thinking in a system like this, and this sort of system pushes organisations to be generally more open with their documents, and just in general with their information. And you just need to think about how you want to manage that technically, but also culturally. So they're my big 4 points if you're thinking about it. Define its purpose, audit and understand your current information architecture for your design, assign people to lead and own the project and make decisions, and consider the cultural implications of a more shared approach to information. They're the things I think most organisations should think about before they do it, and they're not technical things to think about really, they're business and cultural things to think about. All right, I think we've got 5 minutes for questions.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. So I've just got a few more questions. Can you sync between the cloud version and a local small business service folder?
No, it syncs by default. It syncs to your local machine, the local machine, because the whole point is that it wants to be able to work offline with those documents and not rely on a connection to any sort of network for those documents. So the place where it syncs to is a local C drive type location. So that's where it'll go, and I don't think you should. I don't think you can technically even change that, and even if you could, I'm not sure why you would, because if you've already got a shared location, you've already got a shared location. It would be something you'd need to look at case-by-case basis why you'd want to do that.
Okay. Is there a limit to what type of files can be uploaded to the document manager? For example, can we put photos in a specific file?
Yeah, so there are some limits, and it's a kind of a long list, and it's on the Microsoft's website if you searched for document library limitations, and it's got a great, they've got some great technical documentation in there on what you can and can't do. Document libraries actually, there are some, but they're very, they're not common. Like you can PDF. Generally all of the Adobe Suite files and that sort of stuff go up there no problem. So the vast majority of most business files can go up there. For photos and videos, yes, absolutely you can. When you're designing your SharePoint site, SharePoint actually has specific types of libraries for photos and media. They're called media libraries or photo libraries. And so if you had a photo, a big folder of photos, that would be where you'd you probably give it its own library, and you'd have it, and it shows them in little thumbnails, and is a bit better for managing photos. The views of the library are a bit different. So you can actually, I think, even still put photos into normal document libraries as well, but I guess you wouldn't recommend it.
Great. We've just got another question. How safe is SharePoint online when it comes to viruses? So if a virus is downloaded or comes onto a computer, can the virus find its way into SharePoint?
Good question. Look, it has happened with the sync, yeah, but it would happen. It would only happen with that sync tool. So if you had a corrupted document with a virus on it, say a Word, and viruses can come in Word documents, and you have that for some reason, and you put it into SharePoint from your machine, either through a sync tool or consciously, unknowingly, you upload a document with that to a library, then yes, that document will get corrupted. I've never heard of, nor have I seen an example of a whole site being corrupted by that sort of thing. It would probably have to be a pretty serious, pretty rare type of occurrence for that to happen. But you could certainly get corrupted documents in there. I have seen that that have come out of viruses. But in general, actually, it's funny. My next slide, I've got about privacy and security. So I mean, Microsoft takes security and privacy incredibly serious, and when you buy into Office 365, you're sort of buying into their, you're buying into their infrastructure and their philosophy on all that stuff. And so, if that sort of thing happened, it would become a Microsoft issue. And when you subscribe to 365, along comes a bunch of Microsoft support in the back end through that. So if something like that would happen, it would be, it would be you would contact Microsoft Office 365 team, and they would work with you to fix it. But I've never seen that happen. But I guess anything is possible if you're syncing back down to your machine.
Thanks, Stephanie. If we've got time, we'll just take a couple more. How would staff folders be available to the organisation if they're not shared and somebody has left?
Very good question. When someone leaves, you can still, well, if they're in SharePoint, that would be fine because they'd be in SharePoint and it would be managed. If these folders were in SharePoint, it would be in the SharePoint document library, and therefore it would be stored there, and whoever was working on it, if they leave, it wouldn't really matter because the administrators would be able to get to all of it. If it's in their OneDrive for Business account, typically OneDrive for Business would get wiped eventually once that user was completely deleted. But generally when someone leaves, you don't just delete their account straight away. You would change their password, and that would still be there, and you could then, an administrator can then go in and get out any files if they absolutely had to from that person's OneDrive. But that would be the case where it would be, and that again comes back to why you would use OneDrive over SharePoint. If your staff are using OneDrive, they're essentially using their own area to do work-related things, and really good document management would be the vast majority of what they're working on is in shared libraries in SharePoint. If it's related to work, it's related to work, and that's where it is. And they use their OneDrive for Business. I mean, I really don't see why you would need a terabyte. I mean, I have things like my performance review stuff, my pay slips, my, I don't know, little bits and pieces, my own personal research and things that I'm doing for work that I want to have, I can't think of where to put it, I'll just put it in there. But the majority of my work I do in my team sites with my team.
Great. I think we'll just take one more question. I'm sorry we can't get to everybody's questions, but the last one is, what is the maximum size of a corporate shared drive?
As big as you, unlimited in terms of, do you mean your own, like I'm assuming you mean a server shared drive that you'd have is, I mean, is as big as however you want it to be, and it's as big as how much memory you put on that server. In SharePoint, it's unlimited as much as you want. Like I think it was 10 gig per person across the SharePoint site. And then, but you can always add more if you wanted to go to Microsoft and purchase more storage. So really as big as you'd like.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you to everyone for participating today. An email will come around to everyone with a copy of the presentation and a link to today's webinar recording. So don't forget to check out our website, newsletters, Facebook and Twitter for further information on our upcoming events, including our conferences in Wellington, New Zealand and Adelaide, South Australia in May this year. So thank you everyone and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.